Thanks, Brian, and thanks very much, Emma. It's really great to be here. So thank you very much for having me. By way of introduction, my name is Kaelan Knight. I am the Local Authorities Coordinator at the Carbon Literacy Project. So I oversee all our work with local authorities and local government. So from up to combined authorities to parish, town and community councils. So the purpose of today's event is I'm going to introduce to you the Carbon Literacy Project, but more specifically, I'm going to give you some information on a new toolkit course that we have produced for parish, town and community councils. This is a toolkit course that we launched earlier this year in March, and it's something that's available to you to help instigate and improve climate change action in your council. So I'll just explain what I'm going to go through. So if you could keep questions till the end or put them in the chat, we will have a Q&A. So first I'll go over what is carbon literacy. So an introduction to what we actually call carbon literacy. I will deliver I'll go over the local authorities toolkit. Then more specifically, the Parish, Town and Community Councils Toolkit course, which sits within the Local Authorities Toolkit. There'll be some frequently asked questions, some useful resources, so specifically how you can actually access the Local Authorities Toolkit and some other useful information. And then finally, we'll have, as Brian mentioned, an open Q&A/discussion. So that part won't be recorded and it'll be over to you to ask me any questions about the resource. So first up, what is carbon literacy? So carbon literacy, by definition, is an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community or organizational basis. So the whole idea of carbon literacy and someone being carbon literate is that they understand the carbon costs and impacts of their everyday activities, how they relate to their specific roles. So it might be where they live, where they work or where they study, and then having the ability and motivation to actually reduce those emissions. The Carbon Literacy Project itself began in Manchester in 2012 when a group of around 30 people came together to decide what they could do to act decisively on climate change. The project founders and directors, Dave Coleman and Phil Corbell, decided they wanted to emphasize working with and empowering people to have the agency to change themselves. So the Carbon Literacy Working Group was created, and they developed what's called the Carbon Literacy Standard, which outlines the requirements for a training course that produces carbon literate individuals. This approach was piloted in Greater Manchester and began the coordination of the Carbon Literacy Project. Since 2012, the project has expanded across the UK, Europe and beyond. There's now training being done in all 7 continents across the world. So even Antarctica, people often like to question that. So recently there was training done on the UK Science Research Vessel that's studying climate change in Antarctica. The project was established and we now deliver on behalf of the Carbon Literacy Trust, which is a registered charity. So the Carbon Literacy Standard has 4 elements that must be present in all training. These are the learning method, the knowledge, values, and action. So I'll go into a bit more detail on each of these for you now. So the learning method, we define carbon literacy training as a day's worth of learning. To meet its definition and to ensure learners have the ability and motivation to reduce their emissions, we require a full day's worth of learning. It's really important that if you're going to teach someone about climate change and how it relates to their specific role, perhaps that is as a councillor in a community council, they need to understand climate change at the broad level, but understand how it relates very specifically to what they do, perhaps as a councillor or a clerk or another function within the community council. Another requirement is that it is local learning. So that means it's specific to the learner's role and locality, so perhaps where they live, and how climate change might relate to them. Carbon Literacy offers a space for collaboration and peer-to-peer learning. So there is an element of peer-to-peer learning in the content itself, but also in the delivery. And we encourage delivery by peers within parish, town, and community councils. And there's an element of group inquiry. So carbon literacy can't be learned in itself. It needs to be delivered in a group format where you're learning with your peers and inquiring about what you might be able to do to reduce emissions. Finally, all courses are certified against the carbon literacy standard. So there's certain requirements in terms of knowledge that any carbon literacy course needs to have. We have to cover what climate change actually is at a broad level. We need to understand what impact it's having locally and globally. We need to understand the policy position. So I know that's often changing, as we kind of saw today. And the Carbon Literacy Project ensures that this policy is always up to date. But yeah, we need to understand what is the international, national, and then local policy position. And then we need to understand our carbon footprint. So how do we actually reduce emissions? We also cover actions that have the greatest impact, and the whole of your training is geared towards reducing your emissions and taking action relating to your role within the community council. Carbon literacy training is also underpinned by a set of values. So all courses need to adhere to these values. So that is that the power of the individual. Obviously, we all have different, differentiated power to enact change, but we do all have some sort of power to enact change to reduce emissions. That we can work together to create change, so that I can never remember this phrase, but essentially the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. If we work together and we're working across different councils, we're working in the thousands of different parish, town, and community councils across the UK, we can enact really significant change. We need to understand the changes needed, that changes needed can create a better world, and that equity and fairness are key to a sustainable future. The training also acknowledges the emotions tied to addressing climate change. And finally, there's a really key part of carbon literacy that means it's not just a training program. It's not something you just go on, you understand climate change, and that's it. A key element of carbon literacy is that you commit to an individual and a group action as part of your training. And this action needs to be new. It needs to relate to your role within the council or wherever the training is delivered. And it needs to reduce carbon emissions. So you need to explain how you're going to reduce those emissions. So the individual one is something you can do. It doesn't need to rely on others. It's just something you can do in your individual capacity. And the group action is geared towards you influencing others. So it could be that you put forward a proposal. It could be that you involve others in some kind of initiative. That could also be in your community. And the idea is that not only do you learn about climate change, but you put that learning into action and you actually take concrete action to reduce emissions. So you might wonder, how are we doing as a project? We started in 2012. We're still a very small charity, but the value of what we do is that carbon literacy training is very much self-sustaining. We support you to deliver carbon literacy training. We don't actually deliver it ourselves. But that means that organizations across the world can pick up carbon literacy training, they can adhere to the accreditation, and they can deliver training to their peers, they can deliver training to their colleagues or even friends or family. There's now been over 70,000 citizens across the world certified as carbon literate, meaning there's been over 140,000 actions pledged to reduce carbon emissions. And we estimate that that has saved 250 to 100,000 tons of carbon emissions. I explained a lot about, so carbon literacy training is not just one course. So I'm going to talk to you today about the parish, town, and community councils course. But there's nearly 600 courses now, each with a unique identified audience and a specific local context that it is to be delivered to. And we've now engaged over 5,000 organizations who are each delivering their own carbon literacy training, whether they're schools, they might be hospitals, or community councils themselves. And I think a key point to understand is that the Carbon Literacy Project itself does not deliver any training. We are an accreditation body, so we can support you to deliver accredited training, but it's really over to you to actually deliver that in-house, or you can contract that to experienced carbon literacy trainers. So that's a bit of an overview of carbon literacy itself and what we do at the project. I'm now going to get a bit more specific about what I do as the local authorities coordinator and what we have available for local government. So as mentioned, we as the Carbon Literacy Project, we accredit carbon literacy training. So an organization can come to us, they say we want to deliver carbon literacy training, we can provide them with the carbon literacy standard and say, you can create a course, so long as it meets this standard, we can accredit it as carbon literacy training. But for the thousands of councils in the UK, we found that that was quite a big barrier to actually delivering the training, and there's a really key need for training in this sector. So 3 years ago, the then Patrick Alcorn, the head of local energy from the UK government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, realized there was quite a big gap here. So they needed to do something to support councils and other public sector organizations to deliver carbon literacy training. So BEIS, this department's now been disbanded. They funded us for 3 years to produce a toolkit, which would essentially support councils across the UK to deliver their own carbon literacy training. So a toolkit is a sector-specific suite of courses. These are accredited carbon literacy courses that have been developed by peers in a sector. So as the Carbon Literacy Project, we are not experts in local government. So what we did is pull together a writing group of several different local authorities to develop a shareable course that could be used within the sector to deliver carbon literacy training. The courses within the toolkit are adaptable to a local context, so they require a certain element of adaptation to make sure it's relevant to the kind of issues that you might face or the kind of opportunities that you have in your unique area. It's a complete kit for training, so it contains everything you need, and anyone can deliver that training within the sector. So anyone from a community council can pick up one of these toolkit courses and deliver the training to their peers within the council. So the local authorities toolkit as a whole, we launched that in 2020. It's designed for peer-to-peer delivery. It's licensed for the purposes of carbon literacy training. So we only share this for the purposes of carbon literacy training. You couldn't use it for another purpose, such as a shorter course or something that wasn't accredited carbon literacy training. And the whole idea being that this will support you to develop a low carbon culture change within your council and the wider spheres of influence. So particularly for community councils, that really supports you to engage with your communities and your residents to enact change on climate change. The Local Authorities Toolkit is currently free. There is a license fee payable to access updates every 3 years from October 2023. But as I'll get onto a bit later, the Parish, Town and Community Councils course, we're going to share that free of charge with community councils. The only charge for a community council to deliver carbon literacy training is a £10 per person certification application fee. So each individual that attends training needs to commit to their individual and their group pledge. These are required to be written out and then submitted to the Carbon Literacy Project for approval. If they meet the criteria that we set out, then each learner is issued with a certificate to say that they are carbon literate. So the Local Authorities Toolkit, as I've mentioned, is a suite of courses for various different areas of local government. So we started in 2020 with the generic staff course. This was for anyone working in an upper tier local authority. We then produced the leadership and management and elected members courses. Again, these are for upper tier local authorities, but we didn't have anything specific for parish, town and community councils. So last year we pulled together a writing group to develop a more specific course that met the needs of parish, town and community councils. The courses are all they follow a very similar model, but they all differ in the case studies, the kind of examples and the activities that you do, and each relates very specifically to what a elected member does, or someone working in the senior leadership team at a local authority, or someone who is a member of a community council. We also have a community leaders course that we'll be launching in October. This is a complement to these courses, but it enables local authorities to go out into their community and offer carbon literacy training. So not just delivering that training internally, but offering that support to community leaders as well. So I think that will be a really relevant course for parish, town and community councils, especially given their role as, their role working with communities to reduce their carbon emissions. So I'll just run you through a few results from our local authorities toolkit. We're really quite proud of how the rollout has been since we launched it 3 years ago, and it's very much become established in the sector. So the majority of local authorities in the UK now are delivering carbon literacy training, either internally or delivering it using an external training provider. So there's now been over 11,000 staff from local authorities in the UK certified as carbon literate. Over 5,000 of those have been certified using the local authorities toolkit. There's now 250 local authorities who have delivered training internally or via an external trainer. And obviously with those 11,000 staff, there's been over 22,000 carbon reduction actions pledged by local authority staff. And those pledges really relate to each individual's role within a local authority. So there have been senior leaders who've pledged really transformative actions. There's also people who have less power and influence over emissions, but they've also pledged actions that they can take to reduce emissions. And we really see it as very much dependent on a person's power and influence. We don't expect everyone to produce or commit to a really significant action that might transform an organization. It's all about our different power to influence change. Also, we have certified over 900 councillors as carbon literate, and we feel they're a really important audience to get carbon literacy to given their role acting with constituents and also influencing policy within local government. So I've talked a bit about the local authorities toolkit. I think it'd be worth now going a bit more into detail around the parish, town and community councils toolkit course. So this was co-written and piloted by parish and town councils themselves. It's available for internal delivery or via an external trainer. So that means that any of you on the call could pick up this toolkit course. It's an off-the-shelf, ready-made piece, and you could deliver to your peers. If you prefer, you can also contract a number of external trainers who are very experienced in delivering carbon literacy training to local authorities. The Parish, Town and Community Councils Toolkit course is free to access for all organisations until October 2023. It will continue to be free of charge from October for parish, town and community councils themselves. So that means that anyone here from a community council, they can access this piece of material free of charge. and you will continue to receive updates to the climate science, the policy, and the case studies roughly every 6 months. So this isn't just a one-off piece of work, it's something that we provide and regularly update. For county associations, higher tier local authorities, training providers, and out-of-sector organisations, there is a license fee payable to receive those updates. So given we do a lot of work with local authorities in Scotland, we do hope and foresee a role for higher tier local authorities supporting community councils with carbon literacy training. And they can also access this toolkit course for a very small license fee. So the toolkit itself, as I've mentioned, it's 1 day's worth of learning. It's split into 6 modules. So this means that although it's 1 day, you can split that over multiple days. We do appreciate that many people who are involved with community councils have other commitments during the day. So often evening sessions or morning sessions work best. So it's very much there for you to split that up into sessions that are suitable for your colleagues. It's developed for an online learning environment currently, although in October we will be releasing an update, meaning you can deliver the training in person as well. And it allows a customized schedule. So again, you could deliver this over multiple days, perhaps over 2 weeks. We do recommend that you don't deliver the training over more than 2 weeks, as really you want to get that impact there and ensure that the learning isn't kind of broken up and forgotten about. But really it's for you to see what is suitable for your colleagues. The toolkit itself contains a slide deck, so it uses PowerPoint to deliver the actual training. It contains an extremely detailed trainer manual. So this contains an explanation of each slide, the resources used to produce the slide, and also more of an explanation in case perhaps you receive difficult questions or you need to explain something in more detail to someone you're delivering to. There's an activity pack, so a main part of the second half of the training is oriented towards activities where you will discuss with colleagues the kind of low carbon actions you might take. So there's an activity pack to facilitate that. There's a getting started pack, a resource list for you to share with learners afterwards, and evidence forms. So these are the forms where each learner writes out their individual and group pledge, and you submit these evidence forms to the Carbon Literacy Project. The course itself is designed to guide learners towards making informed decisions and taking action in line with your council's priorities and ambitions. We want to empower learners to not only make changes in their professional and personal lives, but to bring others with them. So that really means the communities that you're serving. To really achieve low carbon culture change, you really need to say why it matters and then go on to equip people with the tools to act. So the course starts with module 1, which is a grounding in climate change science and impacts. In the next module, we cover climate change policy from an international level right down to your council's climate policy. So it really brings that international, we look at things like COP, the IPCC, and then bring that down and look at how that relates to national and local policy. A key focus throughout the training are the many wide-ranging co-benefits of taking action and case studies of how other parish, town and community councils are taking action themselves. Learners also explore their personal carbon footprint before moving on to work-based emissions under their influence and how they can integrate climate change decision-making into their role. Another key learning outcome is to further equip learners with the tools and strategies to effectively communicate climate change within their sphere of influence and how to engage the local community. Finally, at the end of the course, learners engage with their council's priorities and ambitions by committing to taking one significant individual action and one significant group action to lower the carbon footprint of their council. So, as mentioned in these evidence forms, in the final module, you start to discuss what you might actually commit to as part of your training and start writing these out. And then you go away and complete those pledges afterwards, which are then submitted to the Carbon Literacy Project for approval. So I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what the actual content looks like. So this is one of the slides from the slide deck. Here we've got some emissions, warming projections. So this is from the start of the course, and it's really geared around looking at what is actually happening with climate science, what impacts might there be, and where current global policies will lead to in terms of the global temperature rise. It highlights the huge difference between where we are and where we need to be. And we regularly update these materials. So in October, we will be releasing a new update to the local authorities toolkit. We're obviously seeing a lot of policy changes even this afternoon. So we will be releasing a new update to all those materials, so it's always in line with the latest science and policy. Then at a more local level, we include a number of blue adaptable slides. So these are parts of the course where we've put in a tool, such as this impact tool, where it looks at the emissions in your local area. And this is really to get the course. Obviously, we can produce a course for parish, town, and community councils in the UK, but there are thousands of those. So how do we make sure that it speaks to the really specific needs and requirements of individual community councils themselves? So these parts of the course will provide you with a tool or a resource, and we ask you to make that specific to your local area. So for example, this impact tool, we just ask you to go on the impact tool, use it for your local area and put the findings onto this slide and explain to learners what they mean. Carbon literacy training is very much real and practical, and it's really about sharing what others have done. So we've included several case studies, and well, there are several case studies throughout the course. This individual slide is from the co-benefits activity. So it looks at some of the policies implemented by other parish, town and community councils, and looks at perhaps the co-benefits that have also been influenced by these policies. I think this is a really key area of the course, especially when we're dealing with the cost of living crisis and having to translate climate policy and how it also has an effect on equity and community, people's health. It can have a financial saving, and it improves our resilience to future shocks. As I mentioned, towards the end of the course, you're really gearing towards what you might do to reduce emissions or engage with your community. So this is an example of one of the activities. This is really emphasizing group inquiry, engaging and collaborating with peers, and drawing upon each other's insights and experiences. Local councils are closest to their constituents, so there's really a unique opportunity to understand the needs of local residents and to include them in plans to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In this specific activity, learners are divided into small groups. Each group discusses ideas on what would be most effectively engage their local community in taking action. And at the end of this session, each group then pitches their best idea to the rest of the room. So having given you a bit of an overview of what's included in the course and how you might be able to use it, generally we could come up against a few frequently asked questions. So I'll cover those now. So the first question we often get asked is, why is carbon literacy a day's worth of learning? So there is a wealth of evidence which proves that carbon literacy training changes people's behaviour and enables and motivates them to take action on climate change. Time is needed for learners to understand the scale of the challenge in the first half of the course, before then moving on to learning about the specific and significant actions they can take in the second half. Only learners who have completed a day's worth of approved carbon literacy training and met the accreditation requirements can be certified as carbon literate. So as I mentioned at the start, to really actually call someone carbon literate and say, okay, you've learned about climate change at a broad level, but then you've made it very specific to what someone does at a community council really does take time. And to give them that motivation and the ability to reduce emissions, again, it takes a full day. So Can anyone use the toolkit? Yes, so anyone can use the toolkit so long as they work at a parish, town, and community council, and they can use it for delivery to their peers. Other people can use the toolkit, so local authorities or training providers can also gain access for a small fee. But the toolkit is designed for delivery to parish and town and community councils. It's not designed for other audiences and couldn't be used for certified carbon literacy training for any other audience. Another question we are frequently asked is, do I need to be a certified carbon literacy trainer to deliver the training? The answer is no. So anyone working in a community council can deliver this training. It's very much a suite of resources. So yeah, anyone can use it. And I will provide some more details on how you can actually access the course soon. We do also provide some support for trainers. So if you are interested in delivering this to your colleagues, myself, I provide individual support for anyone interested. And we also run delivering successful carbon literacy sessions, which I will share more details of very soon. We often get asked how many people can we deliver training to in one cohort. So we recommend around 15 to 20, and we recommend that you deliver alongside a facilitator to ensure that the group inquiry and the activities are facilitated properly. So moving on to some next steps. So to deliver carbon literacy training, the only recommendation that we have is that you are carbon literate yourself. So you should visit our events page to find open carbon literacy courses. On that events page, there are specific courses for people working in parish, town, and community councils. And don't worry, I'm going to share some links to all these things after I've stopped speaking. I recommend you actually just visit the local authorities toolkit webpage. So I'll put a link in the chat. On that page, we have a whole host of resources, including overview documents for the toolkit itself. We have a really useful making the case document. So if you need to put forward a proposal to your council that you want to deliver training to everyone working in that council, we've got some really good arguments for why you might do so. Some case studies of councils doing so as well. We have a quarterly local authorities newsletter where we make announcements. We also release the new updates to the local authorities toolkit via this newsletter. So if you are using the course or you want to find out more, I would recommend signing up. And if you would like more information or you'd like to request access to the toolkit itself, please do email me. I will share my email in the chat. And I'm very happy to discuss individually with each community council how they might be able to use the toolkit to deliver training to their colleagues. As mentioned, we do provide support. So if you are interested, I know many people would love to deliver climate change training to their peers, but actually taking that on is quite a big requirement and probably requires quite a lot of confidence. I've never delivered carbon literacy training myself, so yeah, I'm very well, I admire those who do actually deliver the training. So if you do start to deliver internal training, we host monthly delivering successful carbon literacy workshops. So these are hour-long, they're free of charge, and we run them over Zoom. And they basically run through all the practical elements of actually delivering a session and a whole host of tips for how you can deliver a successful session. Finally, once you are delivering training, one thing you could look to do is aim to certify your council as a carbon literate organisation. So as the accreditation body, we issue individual certificates to learners to say that they're carbon literate. But as a council, you can also apply for carbon literate organisation status. So there are different levels to this, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And they're based on how many people you've trained within your council. So essentially how embedded carbon literacy training is at your council.